Hey, Steve, welcome to the EcomCrew podcast.
Mike, it's always good to see you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of crazy. I don't think that you've ever been on here. We've known each other for a long time, mostly from Seller Summit. We've had a few other lawyers on over the years. You're one of the few lawyers that I look forward to seeing and talking to.
I know.
lawyers get bad names, so but I think it's an important thing. You know, we go through running our businesses and oftentimes don't think about the things that can get you in trouble running businesses, which are usually legal matters. And oftentimes, uh, unfortunately, people don't think about this stuff until it's in their face when there is some type of legal, proceeding or a threatening letter from a lawyer, or somebody in China is like stolen your trademark, and you didn't think about those things, and now you're having to like go deal with those consequences. So I think, just in terms of the conversation today, we want to be talking about things you can be doing to defend your business and things you should be thinking about in your business from a legal perspective. Again, not the funnest subject. I think a lot of us
No.
marketers are always like, oh, let's go talk about an email funnel or some new Facebook ad or whatever it might be. But as someone who's been an entrepreneur their whole lives, and in the current iteration, I quit my job in 2004. So it's been 19 years of doing this. And, I when I was younger, I wish I had someone to sit me down and maybe have this conversation. So hopefully people will get something out of it. Before we get too deep into it, maybe just take a moment to introduce yourself and your firm.
Sure. Well, thanks, Mike. Yeah, it's been a long time since I've chatted with you. And I think we originally started talking about, and this was years ago, I was on your podcast and we talked a little bit about brand. But that really is kind of the tip of the iceberg where an e-commerce seller gets involved with an attorney. A little bit about my background and why I completely get that is I owned a predictive analytics business before going back into law. So I started as a litigator, actually as a prosecutor, doing criminal prosecution in Miami, Florida. And so I really, became kind of, from a guy from Wisconsin, I became pretty tough and jaded. But I decided that I really wanted to try a business, and for 8 years grew a pretty successful predictive analytics company. And so I know when I was in my business, the last person I wanted to talk to was an attorney. And generally, business people, and I know, Mike, we've talked enough, and with you and a lot of the people that you associate with, you have a C-suite usually, and an entrepreneur is the person who runs the business and grows the business, but they have people surrounding them. And a lot of times it's a CFO. If you feel that that's important, it's definitely someone in marketing. It's a chief operations officer, because operations is always important. And I'm never suggesting that the attorney should be one of your C people that you need to talk to every day. Accountancy, yes, you should be more involved. An attorney really is kind of a side relationship for the entrepreneur. And it really is how I look at the role as I went back into law. I look at the role as being one of my entire goal is to get your company successful and clean for a potential exit event. Now, there's some companies that don't want an exit event. Sure, that's fine if they want to be the acquirer. If I'm representing a roll-up or something like that, sure, that's a different side. But 90% of my businesses, I represent about 300 e-commerce businesses. All there, and it comes and goes because they sell. But my goal is to start and build a legal strategy for them so that they can get from point A to point B. And when you're going through due diligence or you're going through a transaction, that it is about as clean as a whistle. And that a trademark or a operational dispute or bad papering on maybe a transition to a corporation or bad governance, that's not going to happen with your business. Because what I can tell you, and Mike, you probably agree, I don't know if you had any experience with this, but when they do due diligence, the other side, all these issues come up and the price starts going down and the deal starts getting delayed.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, I think that that's kind of a common strategy amongst, especially in the larger deals, right? I mean, the idea is we're going to give you retail price or whatever it is that they're going to advertise to you in the LOI that they're going to pay for the business. And then a savvy buyer is going to do everything that they can to negotiate that down. And if there are red flags that come up in due diligence, whether it's trademarks or financials or whatever it might be, they're going to work on needling you a little bit. And if you have all of your T's crossed and I's dotted, it prevents that or keeps you in a stronger position. And so I think that stuff is super important. I mean, we've been there and done that, right? Where it's just like you think, oh, I'm going to sell this business for $1 million or $5 million or whatever. And then it's like, well, we're deducting $200K for this and $50K for that or whatever it might be. And you're usually in a pretty weakened state at that point because now you've, put this business up for sale. You've been through due diligence, which is like worse than getting a prostate exam over many, many months. You're mentally checked out and ready to move on. And you're negotiating from a position of weakness at that point because you just want to get the deal closed. And they're also not wrong, right? I mean, if they're coming to you about these particular matters, a lot of times they're not wrong. And so, the trick then is like, do you put the thing back up for sale and go through the whole process again and hope to find a buyer that isn't savvy enough to ask those questions? Or you just capitulate and sell? The better thing to do is to listen to this podcast and talk, think about some of the things we're going to talk about today and be in a position where those things can't come up. I mean, we've been in a couple of deals where, there wasn't any pushback of any kind. Like the last business we sold was in that bucket. And a large part is because, we had talked to you years and years ago before we even thought about selling our business and had our legal matter stuff in a row. And we also had our financial matter stuff in a row. And there was zero pushback. We closed right at exactly to the penny of what the LOI was at. And they didn't even try. But like in other deals, like I said, we've had people come with pushback and you're just like, well, I mean, you're kind of not wrong. And you can save yourself hundreds of thousands or and potentially, seven figures by doing these things. And so, if you kind of have a checklist, Steve, I mean, what are the things that people should be thinking about and talking to you about to position themselves in the best possible way?
And Mike, I think that's a really good way to look at it. What are the things? Because it's going to be, you've gone through enough transactions where that the due diligence list is really not going to change. And so, I mean, at least at the beginning, it's and so my whole strategy, my whole approach is I want to get to know my clients and know what their dreams and ambitions are at the very beginning of our relationship. And we create a legal strategy on getting to the end and making sure that we can check off all those items. And those items are, number one is that I see it, but I focus a lot on it, is intellectual property. And so, I mean, we could talk about trademark and obtaining trademarks and all day long. It's relatively straight. It's a relatively straightforward process. It is full of rules and regulations and mired in details, and it does need a strategy. So what the acquirer is going to look at a lot of times is, well, I get that they might have either gotten a trademark or have traded under this name for a long time, but do they have an intellectual property strategy? Did they do thorough searches? Do they know other brands that could be impeding on the brand's growth? So, for example, if I have my name of my firm is Emerge Counsel, if there's a To Merge Counsel out there, they're going to do a search to find that mark, and you're going to be like, well, that has had nothing to do with my business for so long. But again, they're looking for chips to draw the value down. So the first thing is, and also the same holds true for if you have a website, they're going to start looking at, well, did you get copyright permission for all the images that you have up? Have you ever had an issue where a third party's come to you claiming infringement? Do you have licenses from example, Adobe or Getty Images for your images? Have you put adequate packaging copyright in place? Do you have what's called trade dress, which is kind of like when you look at a Louis Vuitton, a bag, the bag is functional, like it's a bag, but the Louis Vuitton wrapper around the bag is the non-functional element. That's Louis Vuitton's trade dress. That creates a lot of value usually in the deal. If you owned Louis Vuitton, you'd be selling for a gazillion dollars, but that value is going to go down if you didn't take time to protect it. So they're looking for a strategic approach in IP, basically. And tangentially, they're looking for an international strategic approach. So they're looking at, where's your supply chain coming from? If it's coming from China, did you protect the brand in China? Did you, which is not hard to do, but it needs a strategy. Did you protect the brand in Europe if you're selling to Europe? Then they're going to look at from, and I can go on and on and on in IP, but you need a strategy and you need to know. And I look at the strategy of, okay, where's the product coming from? What are the unique elements of the product? Can we place the cheapest but most rigid protection? In other words, it's a cost benefit analysis. You take where the product is being sourced from. You look at all the stages of the supply chain, and then you also look at the tools you have, which are copyright, trademark, and sometimes you have patent and you have trade secret. And so we kind of find a cost benefit balance where we can check off those boxes and really protect the IP without spending a fortune. And you just need a strategy in that. The second thing is, which is really becoming a big issue, is privacy and terms of use. And so if you've been selling, especially on Shopify, where you don't control that, you're controlling more of the selling process, and you don't have adequate privacy policies, for example, protecting European citizens under the GDPR. There's special regulations in Europe. And the acquirer is going to look at, like, the company has exposure because of how it's selling. And so because they don't have adequate privacy policies compliant with the European Union. And the second one that's really difficult is California. So they're going to be looking at that. A third thing to tick off is product packaging. So in two ways. Number one, if you have a supplement or something, they're going to be looking at if you made FDA, if your packaging was FDA compliant, if your labeling is compliant. Second, they're going to be looking at if you have like organic ingredients in your product. California Prop 64 has requirements that you need to label appropriately for dangerous earth elements. And so they're going to be looking at compliance and a bunch of regulatory terms. Fourth, they're going to be looking at governance. Like, for example, Mike, if you have a board or you're not the sole manager in your LLC, they're going to be looking to see if there's been minutes or notes of board meetings that you have. And that should be set up as early as possible. So really you can show them nothing's happened. Maybe, you had an annual meeting, you got a steak or a lobster, and you talked about the how great the business is. That those minutes are fine, but that the company is being governed, and that the organic documents, meaning the operating documents, are sufficient. Then finally, they're going to go into obviously the financials and making sure that you have good recording and good operational systems that a lot of times, like, for example, QuickBooks, et cetera, has their own terms of use, that you're adequately licensed and that they can have access to those things. So a lot of things come up in due diligence, and a lot of times it really is good to take a step way earlier and make sure you dot your I's and cross your T's on all this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think that might be overwhelming to everybody listening. You just ran off a bunch of stuff. And, of course, when you start talking about legal matters, it's expensive. I mean, lawyers typically charge a lot of money because they spend a lot of time going to school, and it's a pretty niche expertise, and they, quite frankly, probably deserve it based on all the sacrifices they made to get to that point. But I think that, there's probably some happy medium depending on the size of your business. It's always this delicate balance of, the size of your business and how much you have and how worrisome you want to be about protecting this, that, or the other. So if you think about stages of a business, if it's like $1 million business, a $5 million business, a 10 million, 25, 100, what are the order of operations, all the things you kind of mentioned? Let's just start with a smaller business. Let's just say you're like doing $1 million, or you have $1 million sale maybe coming up. what are the things you should be thinking about at that stage? And then we can kind of maybe start thinking about the next steps as you kind
Sure.
of get bigger.
Well, I mean, I think the first thing is to build a good relationship with an attorney that you really feel understands you, your needs,
Yeah.
et cetera. Because my operating model is I've productized a lot of these processes. So we have a trademark program called Total TM, and Total TM is a lot more thorough than the Amazon IP Accelerator and about half the cost. But the the thing is you need to be able to have a relationship with counsel where they understand what you need and what you don't need. And so the beginning stages are most solopreneurs need an LLC, a limited liability company, and an operating agreement, which is just a piece of paper telling the members, if it's, say it was you and your father threw in $5,000 and you threw in $95,000 to start the business. Well, you still need an operating agreement telling how that all went down, like how you got the $5,000, and really making sure that no one gets in trouble for like gifting and not reporting it on taxes. Anyway, there's just kind of a right way to do it. So you need an operating structure, and you need an attorney that understands what you're trying to get to. Like ultimately, what are you trying to do with the business? The second thing is it's really good to clear the brand and we do that at no cost. We have, again, because we want to get to know the client and ultimately help them get to the point where we've created value. And so we have some sophisticated software that clears the brand, meaning, say you're going to name it, again, Emerge Console. Well, it's a good idea to clear that name because you've just spent all this money on branding and marketing and you didn't clear the name. You might be getting a cease and desist letter, or even worse, you don't find out about it until the time comes for you're 6-7 years down the road, you've built goodwill, and all of a sudden your product has to be relabeled. So, and that's a really tough conversation to have and costs many $1,000s.
Yeah, and that happened to a mutual friend of ours at a 10 Seller Summit. It happens, and if she had hired you to begin with, it would have been avoidable.
There's lots of good attorneys out there, but that's how I look at things: is you start, and really that's the beginning. All you need really is like to clear your brand, for an attorney to understand your vision, that you like the person enough that it's not like you dread talking to them, because I certainly dreaded talking to my attorneys. Yeah. And I always felt that the clock was running. Like that's the worst feeling in the world. So we really try and have tried to productize and really work for the work. And the nice thing I have is that a lot of my clients, this is an aside, but a lot of my clients are all over the place because e-commerce is so virtual. And so I don't have to go out to lunch and so a lot of my time, my marketing time, or my time away from time on task is really spent building virtual relationships with clients by having them not be afraid to call me or think that the phone is going to be like have a timer on it when they call, because really I need to know what's going on with them. Almost like it's like if you're a treating psychologist and you have no idea what's going on with the patient, how can you treat the patient? And so that should be on my dime. And and so I just have really good communications with the clients to see what exactly they need after that point. So really the total TM is, or just getting a trademark or a trademark portfolio, the attorney understanding how your supply chain works, because a lot of times you're going to have exposure on supply chain in for example, China, that you could easily take care of if you get to the point where you have some negotiating leverage. So it's really, those are the three things, I think, understanding at the beginning. A good business attorney will explain that you want to have a good relationship with an accountant. You want to set up your books with a ledger that an attorney can understand. And that includes an attorney in due diligence. And so really a lot of the steps are outside the attorney purview, but we want to have our arms around the client and understand who the client is and what their needs are. Once a client starts taking on, say you had needed an investor, and somebody, even friends or family, is going to come and invest, then we really have to look at the operating structure and make sure that the entrepreneur has a lot of coverage and can make the decisions they need to make to run the business. A lot of times a business isn't going to be cash flow positive out of the gate, and an investor might not understand that. And when you have an investor, you also give them rights. And so that can really screw up the business. And I hate more than anything, but I do it, is business divorce. And that costs a lot of money. And I can never give my clients exact answers how that thing's going to resolve. And I don't know, Mike, have you ever had an experience with a business divorce?
Unfortunately, yeah. I mean, I think, you're 19 years in business and people come and go as partners or whatever. And yeah, I mean, things happen, of course.
And that is another thing that we're trying to through low cost, just getting the issues out there that could happen and providing processes and procedures early, trying to avoid the potential that the business could erupt, or that it certainly is a loss of sleep and a loss of money when those things happen. And so as the business gets more sophisticated and the relationship grows, there's lots more things to focus on, but they mostly involve, again, governance, like how you're governing the company. Are you protecting your brand? Are you protecting your product? Are you protecting your supply chain? And how can we do that? Are your contracts with suppliers? Again, when you don't have leverage, again, at the beginning of a business, or say you're $1 million company, you don't have a lot of leverage with the supplier. Like they're going to be like, well, I don't need this. Like you sign the contract or you sign the bill of lading. That's it. And, but when you grow in sophistication and product line, you get more leverage. Well, you need an attorney at that time more to negotiate a contract that's in your best interest. But again, through a 2-minute telephone call telling me what's going on, I can tell you kind of what kind of leverage, and that there's probably nothing to do at an early stage point in time. So I kind of feel like the relationship and the needs grow as the business grows. To get to due diligence, sometimes if the business is successful enough at 0 to $1 million, they're going to exit pretty quickly, and there's not that much to it. But not always. And so,
typically where you start to see this stuff really creep up is in that, like, once you kind of get into the $3 to $5 million deal size, it starts to get a lot more serious. If it's a sub $1 million deal in due diligence, there's not a lot of questions. If buyer's not as sophisticated, they're not spending as much money on due diligence. They're not hiring, a law firm to represent them. They're not using a private equity firm or those types of things to close the deal, or venture capital, whatever it might be. And so you don't run into these types of questions. But you get into the $3 to $5 million deal size, which is usually when you start reaching around $1 million of EBITDA. You graduate to a different class, and I've been on both sides of those deals, and when you start getting up into the $3 to $5 million range, you better have this stuff figured out, because they're going to be asking these questions. They're going to be looking under these rocks, and it's super important. And the other thing that I'll just kind of mention, even if you're way before that stage, you're doing a couple $100,000 a year in profit. If you're like me, when I first got started at 25 or whatever, in this current, like, I had another business when I was younger, but let's
just say 2 years ago.
It was just like 2 years ago. Yeah. When I had a little bit more hair. But I didn't form an LLC. I didn't do any bookkeeping. I had no idea how to deal with my taxes. I didn't file for trademarks or any of this stuff. And it just, you think, oh, I got this idea to start a business, and I got a checking account that I'm going to just run this through on a credit card, your personal stuff. And, I don't know anything about creating an LLC. I don't know who to even contact or really talk to about this stuff. I'm not going to just get on the internet and just type in lawyer and hope to find somebody that can do this stuff. And, the first iteration of business, I just was like figuring out as I went, way too late. I mean, it was always way too late. I mean, whatever it was when it came time to file my first year of taxes, I didn't have any good accounting practice. When it came time to get sued for the first time, I didn't know who to talk to. Like, you're going to get some type of frivolous lawsuit at some point. Someone's going to come after you for some BS. It happens to us. Usually we're in a cadence about once every 7 years. It seems like that we get some type of BS that kind of comes through from a frivolous lawsuit or lawyer or whatever. When we went to sell our first business, I was completely caught off guard. I didn't have any of this stuff in order, and it just seemed like everything was in order. And so, I've gotten more mature. Before we even spend our first penny on anything related to any new business, I go form an LLC. I get an operating agreement in place right from day one if I have a partner, especially, and have all this stuff done. But a lot of people out there probably are going through this for the first time. And you mentioned something that's really important that I want to just hit home here, is that you want to have a relationship with somebody, with a lawyer, as you're going through this journey. And the worst time to get that relationship started is when you've received that letter from an attorney, right? Of cease and desist order, or we're going to sue you for this, that, or the other. Again, I mean, it's always been we've never done anything wrong where like it was a legitimate lawsuit, but it's always some frivolous crap. Like they come up with something that you have a good lawyer on your side and you know who to talk to. You're just going to be in a way better position to deal with this stuff, and it'll be a lot less stressful. Like I can't begin to explain the amount of stress that it is as an entrepreneur to get one of these types of letters, because it's like all you think about, because like you feel like you're being robbed in the middle of the street or in the back alley or something, because you don't know how to deal with this type of thing. And if you have a good lawyer on your side, they'll help you through it. If you've done your basis beforehand, they will help you through it. And so, I would encourage you to reach out to whether it's Steve or someone else, to have this relationship and to get this stuff done. And the other thing I'll just mention is, when I was younger, I was like, every day, I would think about what I had to like. I felt like I was juggling way too many things and just had too much to get done today. And I'll talk to the lawyer another day. But I would highly encourage you to, again, strike up that conversation and make today or this month, or set a deadline of the day that you're going to get that relationship set up, and talk to somebody about making sure, again, your T's are crossed and I's are dotted, because it's kind of like a health checkup. It's like the thing you just don't want to avoid. If you avoid getting a physical every year, eventually something really bad can happen. And this is a pretty similar thing for your business, and it's important to have this stuff done, whether you plan on selling now or 5 years from now or never. It's not necessarily always a thing that's important through due diligence. You mentioned a whole bunch of things today, and as you continue to go on the journey and get bigger, these are things you can take care of like one step at a time, and it can be a lot less overwhelming than, again, the day that the worst kind of case scenario happens, and it's way more overwhelming in that situation.
Well, and it's funny in my role that, everyone out there thinks, especially in the e-commerce field, because it is very, you don't control your whole supply chain. So there's going to be, and you don't really even sometimes control, if you're selling on Amazon, you don't control the marketing platform. Your control is fairly limited. And so things are going to pop up and you're selling to consumers. Like you don't know who the consumers are. So this is Mike, I've admired over the years, an outstanding entrepreneur, like textbook amazing. And he still has had issues, and those issues have taken him off his game. And so, and I can tell you that we're trained to be specifically hands-on. And it also makes my nut every month when clients have issues. But as far as what I like doing, besides that's very intellectually challenging, and you feel like you really can make a difference. But what I like doing is being kind of the general outside, not that much need to talk to me all the time type of person in the e-commerce field, that I have connections that I've made. I was just talking to Mike. I just got back from Thailand, where I was meeting with about 50 to 60 e-commerce clients. E-commerce attorneys from all over the world. And so if there's an issue with Chinese shipping, I can find that person in a minute. I can manage them, the whole process for you. If there's an issue with making sure that you're protected in every country you touch, same thing, GDPR. It just goes on and on and on. And so it's really like using an attorney wisely to use his network, his or her network, and their resources that understand your business. And, e-commerce is a big business for me. And I'm studying it all the time and working on deals, that understand it and you feel like you have a fair and meaningful relationship with, that they really would prefer watching your back than dealing with the triage, although have the ability and skill to deal with when those things come up. But I agree with you, Mike. Those things are going to come up. There's a lot of unsavory matters when it comes to law. It just look at it even from a national policy level. It's just like sometimes the most disgusting thing. But
absolutely,
it's our system. It's a fairly good one, and the world actually has a fairly good way of resolving disputes, as long as you're not trading in like Syria or something.
Right. So, I mean, the reality is I always say it's definitely not a matter of if, it's always a matter of when. Right, when the stuff's going to, it's not a matter of if something's going to come up. It's only a matter of when. The longer you're in business, the higher likelihood. I mean, any one day, it's like a statistical thing. Like any one day, the chances of something happening are basically zero. But over time, it's almost 100%. It's like a hurricane in Florida. Like in any one day, I mean, in Fort Lauderdale, it's probably not going to be a problem. But over time, hurricanes coming through there, or earthquake in California, or whatever it might be. And it's a very similar thing in business with legal matters. I mean, it's only a matter of time before someone hurts themselves with your product and you got to deal with that, or someone's trying to sue you for trademark infringement, or Getty Images come after you for some image on your website, or China's stolen your trademark and now you can't export your products, or you're going through due diligence and you don't have this stuff. So it's only a matter of time. And if you, are taking care of this stuff ahead of time, you put yourself in a way better position. Your chessboard looks a lot better. Than if you don't take care of it and you're left with like one pawn on the board and they have the whole set left. I mean, it's just something to be very cognizant of. So, we're already over time. I want to be respectful of your time. If people are interested in learning more about this stuff or reaching out to you, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Sure. It's the name of the law firm is Emerge Counsel, EmergeCounsel. I also, all my blogs are on LinkedIn under Stephen Weigler. And I blog frequently. I offer anytime you want to call and just get to know me and me to get to know you. I find it just a blessing. And so I don't charge for anything close to that type of thing. And I'll also be at Seller Summit, where I will be hosting little roundtables on these various subjects. And I'm also offering free consultations, but you don't have to be at Seller Summit. I offer free consultations all the time.
Yeah. And again, I'm pretty sensitive about who we bring on in this regard on the podcast. I mean, Steve has a really great reputation in the Seller Summit community, has been going to this event I've known you for over 5 years. I know lots of people who have used you, and you have just a great reputation. You've won lots of awards. It's like I said, one of the good guys, hard to find out there. So if you're looking for someone to just chat with, and he's not going to charge you anything, which to have that initial consultation or just get some stuff kind of in order, which is a rare thing in this space. And so please reach out. I implore you to, again, if it's not him, someone else, right? I mean, it's there's plenty of people out there. Just this is someone that I know and trust and respect. So, Stephen, appreciate it, man, coming on and doing this. And I look forward to seeing you in person at Seller Summit.
That sounds great. Thanks, Mike.